Greetings. I'm very sorry to hear about your thruster problem. I can understand. Sometimes these things happen to me as well. I am going to try again to provide a public comment that I attempted to provide to the Federal Reserve last fall. There were some complications, and unfortunately, it would seem that my most recent effort to provide this in a full version ended up getting truncated, presumably because there wasn't enough time on the clock. Right? When we're dealing with things at certain levels, time on the clock makes a big difference. So let's see how far in we get. I'm going to read excerpts of it. Why? Well, because some of it involves a kind of critique, maybe more appropriate elsewhere. But I will start by saying that what I'm hoping is that whatever it was that was piggybacking off of it, that has thus far been allowed to prevent against it actually getting the appropriate acknowledgement, will be alleviated and will be eliminated as of the reading of this and the posting. This is a public comment that I attempted to provide to the Federal Reserve. It was in consideration of matters related to what was identified as convertible virtual currency and that which would be accepted as legal tender versus that which would be considered non legal tender. So I'm going to read it as is in excerpts. This public comment comes after years of refusing to address how the role of cryptocurrencies is connected to chemical weapons development and disposal. This includes refusal to prosecute people, including members of the military who were complicit during their terms of service, as well as others after their retirement and classification as veterans, who cooperated with illicit activities as a substitute for actual acknowledgement of the role of chemical weapons in the invasion of Kuwait and the First Gulf War. This has aided and abetted a process of normalization efforts to compel cooperation with organized crime. Necessary support mechanisms to curtail potential infiltration of the government have been lacking, while we are exposed to intentional efforts to create bankruptcy in our efforts at appropriate administration. Crime masked as risk has been able to define this offloading and privatization of governmental functions as a means by which to legitimize warlordism as part of long-term process. An audit of the United States Department of State from October 31st, 2019 revealed that for much of 2018 through 2019, there were no records of the source origin of transactions coming into the United States. This violated the Data Act, which had been implemented in 2014. Years had transpired in the course of which the Department of State refused to implement the measures necessary to be in compliance. Why did not the Treasury or the federal government intercede? This was the time frame in which cryptocurrencies were being set up for normalization, both domestically and abroad. There are currently two major legislative tools that need to be considered regarding reporting, as would be referenced in this allows for the promulgation of the material conditions for rendering undesirable economic practices obsolete without sabotage or intentional catastrophization that can be used to leverage a cover up of the culprits. I'm going to stop this here. There is more, including more about concerns that a lack of response, especially within specific time frames, may have when it comes to exacerbating the already mentioned problems in this. I'm hoping that by giving this in this particular context, that this will allow for an appropriate attenuation so that there is no more misunderstanding. This was part of a series of public comments that were put into the public realm for posting by the end of calendar year 2020. I'm specifically concerned because when I attempted to post this with the public comment at the Federal Reserve, it did not show up. And there was what I understand to be manipulation of what did show up in connection with political events that were happening. And my concern is that they were actually intentionally setting up an illicit convertible virtual currency and that it had a material impact on later policy at the level of the Federal Reserve that has persisted into this time. Hopefully, this will allow for some sort of recalibration, and so that the other matters that were contained herein can be addressed in the appropriate forum.